avoiding errors and the size of sample. Guys, we have been discussing various ways and various strategies to maximize the validity of the samples, and in order to bring more of the reliability to our research study. The factor regarding the size of sample is very, very important because the sample size is a crucial point that we should know that what size is, the valid size of the sample, right? So the sample size is related to the, the reliability and the validity of the study. And we must know that our study is only then generalizable if we have appropriate size of the sample. And the question is that which is the balanced size and which sample size is appropriate, right? So it's a crucial question. And as a researcher, we must know that what's the nature of the study which is being carried out by researchers, okay? So the number of subject that which number is accurate and which is an appropriate number for our sample size. So that's a question, and we must explore that how can we answer this question. Primarily, it is related to your nature of the study and the nature of the research question or the problem statement which is under exploration, that how much sample do we need to go for data collection, right? It's totally dependent upon the precision of the research study, okay? So we should know that what size is accurate for our studies, research studies, right? We must also be, estimating the population parameter, that what's, what are those factors, what are those attributes, what are those features within population which we are exploring in the samples, that we are, drawing data from the sample, right? So we must know and we must be able to estimate that population parameter. And then we, as researchers, we must remember that there is no single rule regarding the size of sample, right? Because as mentioned earlier, it's totally up to the nature of study and up to the, the research questions to be explored. So we don't have a single rule regarding sample size. It's totally dependent upon the nature of study and research design. There is, one basic rule that as large as a sample as possible is the best way for any generalizable study. If you want to generalize your study, it's basically a quantitative study, then you must know that the more, the better. So the more is, the larger size of the sample, the better is the result of the study. The more appropriate, more reliable and valid is, the findings of the study. So we must know that. And by the way, you should also remember that for qualitative studies, when we are concerned with information rather than, the representation, then we can go for a study based on one subject or one single sample. For example, you want to study a particular language acquisition processes, then you may be studying one child, right? Because you are concerned with the processes, right? And the steps involved. And most of such studies we do have in literature which were based on one single individual. Like I mentioned earlier about one study which was carried out by Simon Borg at Leeds University, United Kingdom in 1998, when he wanted to explore, the grammar teaching of a teacher, and then he wanted to relate it with the, pedagogical styles of the teacher. So he collected data from only one teacher. Okay, so we do have some cases where qualitative studies are concerned, but for quantitative studies, our focus is always on the the representative rich paradigms, because we have to have maximum representation. So for that purpose, the more the better is the rule, that you should have as larger as possible the number of the size of samples. Okay, now what is a large size of sample? Because large is, of course, another tricky term. That what is large, right? So large is basically if we explore this literature related to sample, then some of the experts have defined large as the 30 sample size for each group, 30 number of samples, okay, 30 informants or participants. So it's general rule of thumb, but it's a bit old. Now, as researchers, we must be able to decide that what is large, right? So if you are collecting 30 samples for each of your group, right, then that's the minimum requirement for quantitative studies, right? Then you should decide that what is the large size of the sample, okay? If for quantitative studies, if the sample is short or it is small, then what would happen actually? Then a standard error would be taking place, right? And that would be leading to the wrong data for the study, and then wrong interpretation, wrong analysis, right? So we may not have the results which are generalizable at the end. So that is a standard error which is related to the shortage of sample, right? And in literature, we have another point of view when experts say that you must include 10 to 20% of your population. For example, if you have 500 of population, 500 teachers, let's suppose, then you are actually, if 10%, if you are taking 10%, then you must be exploring 50, right? So this 10 to 20% is another, idea which is found in literature. But as a researcher, you must decide that what is your appropriate size. And you should also keep in mind that for descriptive studies, when you are describing something, you should have a larger size of sample, right? That's a basic requirement for descriptive studies, that as large as possible, okay? And we must also keep in mind that for pure experimental studies, when we are dividing our samples into groups, for example, if there are two groups, one is the control group, the other is experimental group. So two groups are there. So in this case, we must be having equal size of sample, because this balanced is really important. So these are the points related to the size of sample, and as researchers, we should know them.